T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. On today's episode, I got my college football Week 4 and NFL Week 3 picks and predictions. Going to be giving you guys my predictions for some of the top 25 matchups that we're going to be seeing this week in college football and my picks for all of the upcoming NFL matchups for this week. But before we get into my picks and prediction for college football in the NFL, we got a couple of topics that we got to hit on. The Carolina Panthers, it's a clown show going on down in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's an absolute disaster what the Carolina Panthers franchise is right now. The Baltimore Ravens, on the other hand, I think that this is the scariest team in the AFC. This is the best team in this conference right now, in my opinion. I think they're better than the Chiefs. I'll take them over the Dolphins. I like the Ravens over any other team in the AFC conference this year. And moving on to college football, Missouri, it's been a while since the Tigers last had a 10-plus win season. It's been nearly a decade. Well, they're off to a 3-0 start. They just got a big-time upset over Kansas State thanks to a 61-yard game-winning field goal. And I think this could be a breakthrough season for Mizzou. And then Sam Pittman. Don't know if you guys caught Arkansas's loss to BYU, but it was a pretty weird game. A lot of Arkansas fans are really upset, especially with Sam Pittman. And some Razorback fans are going as far to say that Sam Pittman, he should be on the hot seat. His job security should be a huge question mark going into next season. And the best conference in college football, who do you think it is? The Pac-12, the SEC, or the Big Ten? I got some really interesting thoughts for you. Before we start, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Listen to the audio version of every episode. You can find it on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us with a 5-star review. We're trying to get to 100 5-star reviews before the end of this month. If you enjoy the content and you want to support us, the best way to do so is by giving us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. All you got to do is go to Apple, Spotify, type in the JT Sports Podcast, and it will pop up. Or you can go down to the description down below, scroll down, and there will be the links to the Apple and Spotify versions to the podcast. The Carolina Panthers right now are a damn clown show. This roster is terrible. General Manager Scott Fitterer did a terrible job at building around number 1 pick Bryce Young. And the Panthers right now, they're 0-2. And their season has gotten out to a absolute disaster. I mean, Miles Sanders looks like a massive overpay. He stinks. They have no true number 1 wide receiver. Anytime you have a 30-plus-year-old wide receiver as your number 1 option, you're in trouble, especially if that guy is Adam Thielen. Now, I think Adam Thielen is a serviceable number 2 or number 3 option, but if you're asking him to be your primary option in your offense, you got a lot of problems at wide receiver. I mean, who in this Carolina Panthers wide receiver room do defenses look at and say, oh yeah, like they scare us, we got to pay extra attention to him? You really are going to give Bryce Young, your franchise quarterback, Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, to throw the football to? How big of a disservice have the Carolina Panthers given Bryce Young? I mean, they're giving this man no weapons. He doesn't have a good offensive line. What the hell do you want the brother to do? For people who are calling Bryce Young a bust, I mean, what do you want him to do when he has receivers that can't get open, they can't create separation, they struggle getting off the line, an offensive line that can't give him more than 2.3 seconds to throw the football? You're asking Bryce Young to turn glitter to gold down there in Carolina. Frank Wright and this coaching staff, they haven't looked like the experienced head coach or the experienced coaching staff that I thought they would going into this season. I thought that this coaching staff was going to be a major advantage for Carolina with them playing in a really weak division with the 3 other teams that they go up against having question marks with their coaching staffs as well. Well, Frank Wright, he's starting to show us why Indianapolis moved on from him. The play calling doesn't look good. The scheme just doesn't look like it's good. And Bryce Young isn't being put in situations to succeed. If you want to learn how to ruin your young quarterback, The Carolina Panthers are giving you a good 101 lesson on how to do that. Bryce Young doesn't have a single receiver who he can look at and trust in third down situations when the game is on the line. He can't trust his offensive line to give him time in the pocket to allow these receivers to get open. It's a shit show down there in Carolina. And I had a homie of mine who reached out to me. He was really frustrated. I guess he just wanted to vent. He's just tired of being a Panthers fan. That's the best way I can summarize everything that he was basically venting to me about. He was saying he wants Scott Fitterer fired. A lot of fans feel like Bryce Young was a bad draft pick. Even though he's only 2 games in, Carolina fans have kind of already started to sour over Bryce Young. And here's the thing. You can't expect Bryce Young to play at a high level when he has terrible players around him. This is not a good football team. And there's a reason why Carolina has been bad for the last couple of years, ever since the prime and golden years of Riverboat Ron and Cam Newton. This franchise has been through several quarterbacks. They have been through numerous head coaches after they got rid of Ron Rivera. You had Matt Rule. Then you bring in Frank Wright, who you thought was going to be an upgrade over Matt Rule. I don't see a damn difference in this team. Do you? This is the same team that we kind of saw last year under Matt Rule that we are seeing right now under Frank Wright. This team doesn't look well coached. They don't look like they got a great roster at all around Bryce Young. It just looks like a complete disaster down there in Carolina for the Panthers. I mean, this team had a really good offensive line last year, and they were playing some really good football. They damn near won this division with Steve Wilks as their head coach. An interim head coach nearly won the division for Carolina, and then a year later, they're off to a 0-2 start, about to go 0-3 when they play Seattle on the road this week. If you're a Carolina fan, I know you have to be not only disappointed, but your spirit has to be crushed, because you're wondering just when is this franchise going to figure it out? This franchise just doesn't have a good understanding about what it takes to build a championship caliber football team. And not just a championship caliber football team, but they don't even know what it takes to build around your young quarterback. The Carolina Panthers, man, you talk about an ugly start to the season. I don't think any team has gotten out to a worse start than what Carolina has, other than the Arizona Cardinals. This team is a mess. Scott Fitterer, Frank Wright, we need to be looking at those guys and start asking them some tough questions. And maybe in a couple of weeks, if Carolina continues to struggle, we may have to have a tough conversation about the future job security of Frank Wright and Scott Fitterer, because this team doesn't look like it's heading in the right direction. As a matter of fact, this team looks like it's headed farther left than what they were last year. Under Steve Wilks, they might as well have just hired Steve Wilks if they were going to start this season off 0-2. And for those of you guys who are going to say, oh, JT is early into the season, give us time. No. How much more time do you need? You lost to the Saints and the Falcons. Both of those games were winnable. The Saints and the Falcons are not more superiorly talented than the Carolina Panthers. When you have a experienced head coach with a winning record, a head coach who has led a team to the postseason before, he should be able to lead you to wins over a guy like Dennis Allen, who I think is a really overrated head coach, isn't that good, and then Arthur Smith. The Panthers look discombobulated. They don't have identity. The only good thing about this team is that your defense is going to be able to keep you in most of your games that you play in. But this offense is garbage. I'm just really disappointed every time I watch the Carolina Panthers play this year. And they only have played 2 years, and I think they're only going to get worse. Now, Bryce Young probably will get better as the season progresses and he starts to settle into the NFL and the game starts to slow down for him a little bit. But even when he starts playing better, I still don't know if the Carolina Panthers are going to be all that better of a team. The Carolina Panthers very well could be a team that wins less than 7 games this year. with how tough their schedule kind of looks and how bad they've played the first couple of weeks this season, I don't think this team is going to win this division anymore. And I think that they're probably going to be in for a very tough and long season with Frank Wright and rookie quarterback Bryce Young. This team is just an absolute disaster. The AFC's most scariest team right now is the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Baltimore Ravens, they don't get as much praise as teams like the Chiefs and the Dolphins do because there's a narrative that Lamar Jackson just isn't good enough to get it done in the postseason. He just is a playoff choker, and that's forever what he's going to be. Well, the Ravens, this offseason, they overhauled their coaching staff. They bring in new offensive coordinator Todd Monken, who replaces Greg Roman. And the decision to hire Todd Monken is paying off dividends for this franchise because this offense looks the best it ever has in years. Lamar Jackson put on a masterclass passing performance against the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm talking about he was hitting all the short, intermediate, the deep throws downfield. Todd Monken is going to have Lamar Jackson playing at a level that we haven't seen since 2019. And if you remember 2019, you remember Lamar Jackson won NFL MVP that year. With the supporting cast that he has, Odell Beckham Jr., Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, a really good offensive line, and a play caller who now knows how to call some really good passing concepts and also knows how to call complimentary style football. The Ravens just aren't an air raid team where they just throw the football all game long. They also know how to run the football as well, and they know how to mix things up, and they also not just are utilizing Lamar Jackson as a runner, but they also are utilizing him and showcasing more of his ability to be a really good thrower of the football, something that many people have criticized about Lamar Jackson, even though he's a better thrower than what many people give him credit for. The Bengals right now, they don't look like they're in a good spot. Joe Burrow is dealing with a calf injury. The offensive line doesn't look that great. The defense didn't really have a good performance against the Ravens neither. And with Joe Burrow dealing with that calf injury, it may cost him to have to miss a couple of games. And even if he is able to play through it, he may not have the same season that we saw from him in last year and the season before when he led the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl. The Ravens, they have a great opportunity to take advantage of a Cincinnati Bengals team that right now, they're kind of reeling right now. They're kind of in wounded animal mode. Joe Burrow's injured. He's not playing great football. This offense is struggling to generate explosive plays downfield. And the Baltimore Ravens, although they are dealing with a good amount of injuries themselves, the fact that you're playing at this high of a level without some of your key players, imagine how good you're going to be when you get some of those guys back. Marlon Humphrey, he's going to come back eventually. You're going to have a couple of other guys on the offensive line coming back fully healthy. The Ravens, to me right now, are the best team in this conference. Some people may push back against that and say the Miami Dolphins. Some people may still go with the Kansas City Chiefs. And then some of you guys are going to say, oh, it's way too early to be giving the Ravens this title. Man, I had the Ravens as the best team in the AFC before this season even started. I got them winning 14 games this year. Lamar Jackson is already unstoppable when he chooses to run the football. So imagine how good he's going to be now that he has a competent offensive coordinator that's going to call some really good plays in the passing game and is going to take better usage or is better utilizing the personnel that the Ravens have than what Greg Roman did. Even though Greg Roman never had this kind of talent at receiver, it's not like he knew how to utilize talented receivers anyway. Marquise Brown isn't too bad. He's doing pretty good with Arizona, and he was underutilized during his time with the Baltimore Ravens, bad to the point where he demanded a trade just because he didn't want to be in the offense anymore. So seeing Todd Monken calling plays for the Baltimore Ravens has to be a fresh of fresh air, or has to be a breath of fresh air if you're a Baltimore fan. You now have an offense that is good enough to go toe-to-toe in the postseason against some of the best offenses in the NFL, like the Buffalo Bills, the Chiefs, and the Bengals. The reason why Lamar Jackson hasn't been able to have the same success as his counterparts, such as Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, is because he hasn't had the same amount of talent that those guys have had to work with. He's had some really good offensive lines, but not the same amount of talent when it comes to receivers that Mahomes and Joe Burrow have. Mahomes still has Travis Kelce and Andy Reid, and Joe Burrow has T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Tyler Boyd, the best receiving core in the NFL. Lamar Jackson, he never had that until this year. So with the weapons that Baltimore has offensively, Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson, if he can stay healthy, the Ravens should be the best team in the AFC this year. Every time Lamar Jackson has gotten injured, the Ravens have either had the 1 or the 2 seed, and then their season went left. If Lamar Jackson stays healthy, they're going to be in the conversation for having the best record in the AFC and possibly getting that number 1 spot come playoff time. Look out for the Baltimore Ravens. If you are overlooking the Baltimore Ravens and you're sleeping on this team, you need to wake up before it's too late. Because the Ravens, I think, have a very good shot at being able to win the AFC this season. Now, let's talk about Missouri, right? This could be Missouri's best season since 2014 when they went 11-3 under former head coach Gary Pinkel. Now, they got a huge win over Kansas State last week, 30-27. They hit a 61-yard field goal to win the freaking game. College football at its finest, people. And Eli Drinkowitz, this is somebody that I've been heavily critical of. I'm not really super high on Eli Drinkowitz. I think he's a mid-head coach at best. But the way Missouri season has started off, they got a very good chance to have the best season that they've had in a decade, pretty much. This is a team that possibly could win 10 games this year. And I know it sounds crazy. Missouri winning 10 games, JT? Are you high? No, I'm not. Listen. First of all, Missouri has a pretty good team this year. And I think that in terms of determining who's the second best team in the SEC East, it's wide open. You got South Carolina, who's bad. They're not in the conversation. You got Florida, who just got a big win over Tennessee. We still don't really have a good idea of who Florida is as a team, but they are a capable team. That's what we know about them coming off their upset over Tennessee. You still got Tennessee, who still most people will consider to be the second best team in this division, despite their loss to Florida. But I think there's a strong chance that the Vols probably don't replicate the success that they had last season. They probably could be a 9, maybe 8-win team, depending on if that defense can improve. And then you got Kentucky, who also could be in the conversation. But you look at Missouri, Brady Cook is playing some really good football. Brady Cook, last year, he wasn't that great, but he finished last year off on a pretty high note. And this season, he's carried the momentum that he built at the end of last season into this year. He has no interceptions. He's thrown 5 touchdowns. He also has a couple of touchdowns on the ground as well. And against Kansas State, that was one of Brady Cook's finest performances. 2 touchdowns. He had 1 on the ground as well. Brady Cook could be one of the biggest surprises at quarterback in a very underwhelming quarterback conference right now. The Southeastern Conference, outside of Jaden Daniels and KJ Jefferson and Spencer Rattler, there's not really a lot of great quarterbacks in this conference. And I think if Brady Cook can continue to play the way that he has the first couple of games of the season for Mizzou, Missouri has a chance to beat some of the better teams in this conference this year. Like, they play LSU in a couple of weeks. I don't think that's a game that Missouri doesn't have a shot at being able to win. LSU is a good team, but I think Missouri is a pretty solid team also that's more than capable of being able to pull off the upset. You got Kentucky on the road. You got South Carolina before your bye week, and then you play Georgia on the road. And then you got Tennessee and Florida at home before you face off against Arkansas to close out the season. Now, their next 2 games are pretty easy. You got to play Memphis and Vanderbilt. So as long as they can avoid any upsets in those games, they could go into that LSU game being 5-0 and most likely ranked inside of the top 25. Eli Drinkwitz, has his team playing some really good football right now. I have viewed Missouri as a mid team in the SEC. But this season kind of could change my perspective about how I view Missouri football moving forward under Eli Drinkwitz. If they can win 10 games this season, I think that you got to look at Eli Drinkwitz and give him a lot of credit and a lot of applause. Because Missouri football for over the near decade has pretty much been irrelevant. Yeah, they've made it to a couple of bowl games here and there, but they haven't really been anything that they used to be back in the glory days when they were going to the SEC championship and they had guys like Shane Ray who were going off, who eventually became NFL draft picks. It's just really good to see a program like Missouri having a little bit of buzz. And they aren't really having that much buzz, despite the fact that they got a big upset over a really good team in the reigning Big 12 champions, Kansas State. And they didn't even get ranked inside of the top 25 this week, but Florida did, though. Isn't that effed up, Missouri fans? It's fucked up how Florida, despite only winning 1 game against a ranked team, having another win against FCS opponent, gets ranked in the top 25 with them pulling off upset over Tennessee, but you pull off upset against Kansas State and you don't get any respect for it. You know, Missouri football, this program, if they can continue to have the season that I think they can have, this recruiting class probably could look a lot better. They currently have the worst recruiting class in the SEC right now, according to 247 Sports. If they could get a big win over LSU or even Tennessee, Arkansas, that could drastically help them in recruiting, because it's like now you're not just pitching to recruits. You're not just selling to recruits about what you think your program probably could be in the next 3 to 4 years. If you come and play for us, we're not good right now, but with you here the next 2-3 years, we can be a legit contender in this conference. It's like now you're actually showing these recruits what you're saying is actually, you know, something that can actually be trustworthy. This is something that recruits actually can take into account, and it's not just all talk. Is actually being replicated and shown on the field. Now, when you talk to these recruits, you can say, yeah, like, we're not ready to compete for the SEC right now, but we're building towards that. And now you actually have the success on the field to back it up with the win over Kansas State. Regardless how your season goes, that win over Kansas State is big. You can tell a recruit in their living room and say, hey, like, yeah, we may have had a disappointing season where we won only 6-7 games, but we got a big win over Kansas State. And with players like you on our roster, we can get more of those wins consistently. A 10-win season for Missouri will be huge for this program, because they kind of have came a little bit to the point where nobody even pays attention to Missouri anymore. Unless you're just a diehard Missouri fan, nobody really talks about the Tigers like that, how they used to anymore. And it's a little disappointing, because when I first got into college football, Missouri was good. They were one of my favorite teams to watch, mainly because of the uniforms. But since then, this program has just been on a downwards decline. And maybe 2023 is the season that Missouri not just breaks through in terms of being a legitimate threat in the SEC for the foreseeable future, because with the college football playoffs expanding, yeah, we know schools like Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee and LSU are going to be there. But if you're looking for a second team from this conference who could possibly get in, if Missouri can't continue to turn things around over the next couple of years, maybe they could possibly be a college football playoff contender. But right now, this is a program that is trying to get back to what they used to be. And this could be the kind of season that Missouri could kind of go off and they could win 10 games. I think 10 wins is definitely possible when you look at how Missouri has played up to this point. They got really good receivers. Luther Burden was the best receiver coming out of his recruiting class. He looks like one of the best receivers in the SEC right now. You got a pretty solid defense as well. Even though your defense can give up big plays and can give up a lot of points at times, this is a defense that can get big stops and big moments. Missouri, keep your eyes out for them if you're a fan of the SEC, because this is one of these teams that I think possibly could have a 10-win season and nobody really could see it coming because they've been down for a whole decade. And when a program like Missouri ends up being good, it makes me a little happy because I always end up having a little bit of nostalgia anytime I watch Missouri play, because this was one of my favorite teams to watch when I first got into watching college football. Arkansas is going backwards under Sam Pittman. Ever since his second season in 2021 when they went 9-4, the Razorbacks have regressed ever since. They went 7-6 in 2022 and they're 2-1 right now, and they are coming off a really upsetting loss to BYU, 38-31. And let me tell you guys something. Razorbacks fans are really, really upset with Sam Pittman. And there are a lot of Arkansas fans who feel like he should be on the hot seat. Now, nobody's calling for him to get fired right now. And I'm not saying that Sam Pittman needs to be fired, but his job security definitely has to be put in question at this point because Arkansas is not moving forward. You're Arkansas. You should not be losing to BYU. And I get that Arkansas plays one of the toughest schedules in the country every single season. I get that. Arkansas fans get that. Arkansas fans are not expecting to compete for national championships, or they're not even expecting to be a playoff contender. They would love to be. They hope they can get to that point, but they just want to get back to the level that they used to be when they used to be a consistent 9-10 win program year after year. And they haven't been that in decades, or in a decade since Bobby Petrino. You look at Sam Pittman in 2021 when they went 9-4, you thought that Arkansas was starting to get back to what they used to be, being that consistent 9-10 win program. But instead, they go 7-6, they lost to Liberty, and then this year, you lose to BYU. Arkansas's defense still doesn't look all that great. It looks a little bit better, but not incredibly better. We're going to get more of a good indicator of how good this defense is this week against LSU. But offensively, they definitely look like they've taken huge steps back. Not just one step back, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps back, because they lost their offensive coordinator who went to TCU. And their new offensive coordinator is Dan Enos. And me being a Miami Hurricanes fan, I'm going to tell you, Arkansas fans, be prepared for a disappointing year on offense, because Dan Enos is not a good play caller. I don't even know why he was hired to be the offensive coordinator for Arkansas. When I saw Dan Enos was hired as the OC for Arkansas, I laughed and I said, have fun with that. Because when he was calling plays from Miami, he was dog shit, and he got thrown out to the wolves pretty fast by Manny Diaz. So if you're a Razorback fan and you're hoping that this offense is going to improve, just go back and watch some tape when Dan Enos was calling plays for the Miami Hurricanes, and you're going to have a pretty good understanding of what you're going to be in for this year. It's going to be tough sledding. KJ Jefferson had an uncharacteristic game against BYU, turning the football over, something that he doesn't really do that often. He's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in college football. This offense just doesn't look the same, and we knew that going in. Arkansas kind of had some questions offensively. They were bringing in a couple of guys from the transfer portal who they are expected to be key contributors on offense this year. You got a new OC, which, you know, it always takes a little bit of time to get acclimated to a new play caller, but losing to BYU, fam, I don't think nobody expected that. It doesn't matter how good BYU is this year. You're Arkansas. You're playing in the Southeastern Conference. You should not be losing to Brigham Young University. I'm sorry. You should not be losing to them. You are Arkansas. You should be able to beat BYU. And what's upsetting about looking back at that game is that Arkansas had a pretty big lead on those boys at one point and just completely collapsed and imploded on themselves. This program has yet to get back to what they used to be in the prime years of Arkansas football when they had, God rest his soul, Ryan Mallett at quarterback. And this was actually one of the best teams in the SEC. They weren't competing for championships or anything, but there used to be a time when you used to play Arkansas, and if you were an Alabama fan, you got a little bit nervous. Now, when you play Arkansas, you don't really get nervous at all. You know that they're not going to be great defensively. And offensively this year, they may take a step back from what they have been offensively the past couple of seasons. Sam Pittman, I definitely think it's fair to say that he should be put on the hot seat. This program hasn't done anything since 2021 that has topped that season. You see, you want to continue to elevate. You're supposed to be moving forward in life. You're not supposed to be going backwards. And Sam Pittman just has his program going backwards. And he's not one of those offensive gurus, defensive gurus. He's a CEO head coach, which means that he hires guys to call the plays on offense and defense, and he just sits back and manages the team. Dan Enos, it looks like they may need to make a quick change at offensive coordinator very fast if they can, because I don't see this offense getting better. I don't think this is just early season rust. I really think that Dan Enos is going to hinder the performance of this offense, and he's going to make KJ Jefferson regress. I'm not hating on Dan Enos. I don't have anything against the brother, but all I do is just give my opinion. And the last time I saw Dan Enos calling plays for my Hurricanes, he was terrible. And Arkansas fans, I think you're probably going to get the same out of Dan Enos. I don't think much has changed out of him. Like I said, defensively, I think that you do look better, but we're going to see just how better you look truly against LSU and when you get into the meat and potatoes of your conference schedule. But Sam Pittman, man, it definitely has to be a little bit of heat on that seat when he sits down in his coach's office at his coach's desk, because Arkansas isn't taking the steps in the right direction that you're hoping for if you're a Razorback fan. I mean, in 2022, we get they dealt with a boatload of injuries, but even still, they lost to Liberty. They could have been an 8-9 win team easily last year. And this year, yeah, the season's not over. I mean, you still got a lot of ball left and you got a lot to play for. You're just 2-1, but losing to BYU is a really ugly loss, and a loss that kind of makes you look at Sam Pittman. It makes you start having some tough conversations. There are many Razorbacks fans who are not pleased with how this team has performed under Sam Pittman the last couple of years since that 9-win season in 2021. The Pac-12 this season has been better than both the SEC and the Big Ten. Over the last couple of years in college football, the SEC and the Big Ten have been undoubtedly the best conferences in the whole entire sport. But this season, though, the Pac-12, in their dying season, their last breath, has become the top conference in college football this season. And you look at the quarterbacks in this conference: Bo Nix, Micheal Penix, Cam Rising, Caleb Williams, Sheduer Sanders, DJ Uyunglele, Cameron Ward at Washington State. The list just continues to go on and on and on. It is no surprise why the Pac-12 is the best conference in college football at this moment. You see, yeah, this conference has kind of taken a little bit of some tough losses to the SEC. Cal lost to Auburn. You look at the fact that Utah beat Florida. That was an impressive win. But outside of that, when Oregon played Georgia last year, it was a bloodshed. So it's like, yeah, you can say this conference has taken a couple of losses to the SEC. Arizona State lost to Mississippi State not too long ago, but those are the bottom of the barrel teams in this conference. When you look at the Pac-12 this season as a whole, this is one of the deepest, if not the deepest conference in college football. You see, when people talk about the SEC, all you really have is Alabama and Georgia. And this season, in particular, you really just have Georgia because Alabama, they struggled against USF. They don't have a quarterback. Alabama probably could lose 2 or 3 games this season. You got LSU. They're a good school. They're one of the best teams in college football. They're up there. But outside of Georgia, Alabama, and LSU, I don't think that the SEC is all that deep as what it used to be in the past. Arkansas just lost to BYU. I don't think BYU is going to be that good this year, despite the fact that they're 3-0. You got Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee, just all bottled up together in the middle of the SEC East. Nobody can really challenge Georgia. Outside of Georgia, Alabama, and LSU, there's not too many teams in this conference that I think will be able to beat a lot of teams in the Pac-12. I think outside of the 3 schools I just mentioned, Oregon, Washington, USC, I would like them to beat the other teams in this conference. I would take Washington and Oregon over Tennessee, Florida. I mean, you look at Mississippi State, they nearly lost to Arizona, and they had several turnovers that they forced in that game, and even then, the game was still fairly close. Ole Miss, they played Tulane. Yeah, they did cover, and they did beat Tulane by a pretty comfortable margin. I mean, their defense was getting shredded by Tulane in the first half, and Tulane was down their starting quarterback for that game. The SEC is not as good this season as what it has been in the past. Now, the Big Ten, bruh, I've been saying this for years. The Big Ten is the most overrated conference in college football. People talk about the top heavyweights in the SEC. Bruh, you can't get mad at the SEC for just having Alabama, Georgia, and LSU when there's only 3 teams that run the Big Ten. Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Outside of those 3 schools, who else does the Big Ten have that would be able to compete in the Pac-12 this year? You think that Iowa would win anything in the Pac-12 with that offense? Good luck. They got a great defense, but I don't think they got an offense. Maryland, okay, they could be a little interesting in the Big Ten. Wisconsin, they already lost to a Pac-12 school. They lost to Washington State. Illinois, they're not good. Purdue is not good. Like, I can name way more bad teams in the Big Ten than I can name mid to okay teams and great teams in the Big Ten. There's way more bad teams in the Big Ten than there are great teams. When you're looking at a conference from top to bottom in terms of teams that can be championship contenders all the way to teams that probably are going to be fighting for bowl eligibility, this is the deepest conference in college football this year. We know about how Washington, USC, and Oregon are the 3 primary frontrunners to not just be able to win this conference, but also being able to potentially make it into the college football playoffs and win a national championship. You got Utah, who also is in that conversation, but I don't think they are ever going to reach a point where they're going to be a championship contender. Not until the playoffs expands to 12 teams like it will next year. Then you got your Colorados, your UCLAs, teams that nobody really expected to be as good as what they are at this moment. Dante Moore is balling out. Sheduer Sanders has been arguably the best quarterback in college football outside of Caleb Williams. You got Washington State, Oregon State. There's just so much meat in this conference. It's like when you look at the SEC, it's like after the first 3 teams, it's like it's everybody else. But you look at the Pac-12, it's not just led by just 3 great teams. Everybody in this conference is a quality team. The majority of teams in the Pac-12 would have their way against the SEC this year in the Big Ten. If you don't think the Pac-12 is the best conference in college football this year, then I don't really know what to tell you other than you may need to get your eyes checked and you may just be a little bit biased. The Pac-12, when you look at their seventh team or the team that's going to be in seventh place in this conference compared to the team that's going to finish in seventh place in the SEC, I think that their seventh place team could potentially beat the seventh place team in the SEC. People think just because the SEC normally has really good teams, they have great teams and they're the best conference every single year. That's not the case this year. USF was hanging around with Alabama. Alabama lost to Texas. The SEC is not the juggernaut this season that it used to be in the past. The SEC looks very wide open outside of Georgia. Georgia's the only guarantee in the SEC. Outside of that, we don't know who the hell could be in Atlanta come the SEC championship. You look at the Pac-12, the Pac-12 is wide open, but it's not because teams are having down years. It's because a lot of these programs are having breakthrough seasons. Oregon State came off their first 10-win season in years. You're looking at a Washington team that looks as good as any other team in college football. I think Washington, the way they've been playing right now, they could beat Georgia. USC, they could compete with Georgia. It's like a lot of people overlook the Pac-12 because of the reputation that this conference has garnered over the last couple of years. A lot of these teams tend to be a little bit more finesse. They're not all that tough up front. Well, this season, the Pac-12 and their dying breath, they're making a statement in college football. They're telling you that, hey, even though we're about to be irrelevant come the end of this season, we're going to go out with a bang, and you're going to remember the Pac-12 for the rest of your life after the end of the 2023 college football season, because I really believe that one of these teams is going to make it into the playoffs and they're possibly going to be able to make it to the national championship. This is the best conference in college football. You got so many good teams. Washington State, Colorado, Utah, UCLA. This conference has so much depth. No conference in college football has the depth and quality of teams that the Pac-12 has this year. And the main reason for that is because a lot of these programs have really good quarterbacks. Hell, even the quarterbacks that you don't really know that much about, like Cam Ward at Washington State, if you watch Cameron Ward and you watch some highlights and you watch some film on him, you mean to tell me that you don't think right now he would be the best quarterback in the Big Ten or the Pac-12? Because he would be, in my opinion. DJ Uiagalelei, cast out by Clemson, goes to Oregon State, and he's balling out right now in Corvallis. Bo Nix wasn't that great at Auburn, goes to Oregon, resurrects his career. Micheal Penix didn't really do much outside of one season at Indiana, transfers with Kalen DeBoer at Washington, and he's now one of the best quarterbacks in college football and a Heisman frontrunner, in my opinion. The SEC, with the lack of quality quarterback play that they have this year, it's really hurt the play of that conference. The Big Ten, they've always really just been a conference that's only really been 3 teams, and then it's been everybody else. You may have a team like Wisconsin from the West win 10 games, and they could be really good, but outside of Wisconsin on their best years, when they win 10 games, that's really it. The Pac-12, this is college football's deepest and most talented conference this year. The quarterbacks are really good, but the overall teams are really good as well. I think the Pac-12, they're going to be the best conference that college football fans have watched all season by the time the season concludes. I don't think the SEC is good this year. There's a lot of poor play in the SEC. Yeah, you do have Ole Miss and a couple of teams like Missouri who are surprising, but you also have some teams that don't look as good as what many people thought they would be, such as Tennessee. Tennessee very well could be a team that only wins 8-9 games this year. They could definitely crash back down to earth. South Carolina, their season hasn't really gotten out to a great start. They got whooped by UNC, their rival who plays in the ACC. It just hasn't been a good season for the SEC. And the Big Ten, the Big Ten has always been overrated to me. You've had a couple of good schools that come out of nowhere every once in a while, like that Michigan State team with Mel Tucker that year when they went all the way to the Peach Bowl. I mean, but outside of that, man, the Big Ten is really a 3-team race every single season. Even when they get rid of divisions and whatnot, it's still going to be a 3-team conference. So I think that the Pac-12, even though this is the last year that it's probably going to exist, has made a really strong statement to the other power conferences in college football that right now the Pac-12 is the main attraction to watching college football. Honestly, like some of the best games that we're going to see this season are going to be played in the Pac-12 this season. Like, I hope a lot of you guys like Pac-12 After Dark. I hope a lot of you guys are up after 10 p.m. because that's where you're going to find some of the best action in the nation this year. Time for you guys to get pissed off at me. Week 4 college football predictions and picks. Going to be giving you guys my picks for all the top 25 matchups. We got Miami going on the road to face Temple. I'm going to give Miami the W. There's no way the Canes are going to lose to Temple. This is a really good Miami Hurricane squad. Still don't know how I feel about this team in terms of if they can be able to compete for the ACC this year. I don't want to get my expectations or my hopes up for the Canes because every time I do, they let me down. All I'm going to say is that the Hurricanes look really good this season. I like them to take care of Temple. I'm taking Michigan over Rutgers. I believe that Coach Harbaugh is coming back. They should steamroll Rutgers. Even though Rutgers is getting out to a pretty good start. They're 3-0. They're having a pretty fast start for Rutgers standards, but I think they definitely take their first loss of the season against the Wolverines. Florida State versus Clemson, the battle for ACC supremacy. Could we see a changing of the tide in this game if Florida State pulls off the win? I think we could. I like the Seminoles. I think that Clemson, they're going to be able to keep this game competitive. I don't think that Florida State is going to win this game convincingly. I don't think this game is going to go the same way their win against LSU did. I think Clemson is better defensively than LSU. And I think with how good their defensive line is, they're going to be able to neutralize the mobility and the elite athleticism of Jordan Travis. And I think that Clemson can keep this game close into the fourth quarter. I still like Florida State to pull off the win. 27-24 is my final score prediction. I'm going to take the Seminoles. I think Oklahoma takes care of business against Cincinnati. They had a really ugly loss to Miami of Ohio last week. Anytime you lose to Miami of Ohio, you're in trouble. Emory Jones, he's looked pretty solid. This is the best that Emory Jones has ever looked in all of his mini stops. Florida, Arizona State. This is the best I've seen Emory Jones play. But Oklahoma, they've been rolling. I think that they're probably going to steamroll Cincinnati. I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma has the backups in by midway through the third quarter. Now, for the next slate of games, man, I'm trying to pull it up. We got Colorado going on the road to take on Oregon. Now, this is tough for me because you guys know that I've been high on Colorado from the get-go. I've picked this team to win 7-8 games before the season started, and I've been on the money about Colorado. And I picked them to win every single game that they played in during the regular season up to this point. Am I going to pick against Colorado for the first time this season? Am I? Man, I like Colorado to get the win. I know they're going on the road and they are playing in a really tough environment at Oregon, in the zoo. Really tough to win at Autzen Stadium in Eugene, Oregon, but Oregon doesn't have a great defense. Oregon is a 21-point favorite in this game, but with the way their defense performed against Texas Tech, I doubt that they just bottle up this Colorado offense. Yes, we know Colorado doesn't have an offensive line, but it doesn't matter. They got great receivers. You got Sheduer Sanders, debatably or arguably the best quarterback in college football right now. I don't think Oregon's defense is going to be stopping this Colorado offense. Now, Colorado's defense probably won't be stopping Oregon's offense too much neither, but the thing with Colorado's defense is that although they give up a lot of points and a lot of yards, they get big stops and big takeaways when it matters the most. So I like Colorado to pull off the big-time upset against Oregon, and I think that the Deion Sanders and Colorado Magic continues going into their matchup against USC next week. UCLA takes on Utah. We still don't know the status of Cam Rising. We don't know if he's going to be able to play in this game. UCLA, they've been practicing like Cam Rising is going to play in this game, but there's a good chance that he still isn't healed from his injury. And when you look at UCLA, Dante Moore has looked really impressive. I mean, he doesn't even play like he's a true freshman. He plays like he's a freaking veteran and that he's been playing in college football for like the last 5 to 6 years. I definitely think that this is going to be a big test for him, especially going on the road in Salt Lake for his first big-time road game of his career. This could be a difficult game. Now, if Cam Rising plays, I think that Utah wins. If Cam Rising doesn't play, I think that UCLA gets the win. And according to the reports that's coming out, it seems like we don't really know the status of Cam Rising, so I'm going to take it that he's still not going to be available to play. I like UCLA to get the win. UCLA, they're really good up front. They have some pretty good playmakers on the outside at receiver, and I think that this probably is the best that the Bruins have been defensively under Chip Kelly. Utah, with a backup quarterback, I saw them nearly escape with the win against Baylor, and Baylor isn't even that good this year. Utah, I like them, but until Cam Rising comes back, I don't see how they end up beating a top team, or at least one of the better teams in the Pac-12. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, like, Utah without Cam Rising, I don't think they're going to be able to get too many wins this year in the Pac-12 against some of the better teams in this conference. I like UCLA to get the win. Ole Miss taking on Alabama. A lot of bettors are picking Ole Miss in this game due to the quarterback woes that Alabama has dealt with up to this point this season. Now, Tyler Buckner, Ty Simpson, both got action against USF. They weren't good. Jalen Milroe, they're going back to him. He's going to be the starting quarterback in this game. Alabama defensively, I question how they're going to perform against a really good Ole Miss offense. Jackson Dart has been playing really good football. They got some pretty good receivers. They got a lot of depth there. But I don't know about that defense. And Pete Golding is their defensive coordinator. And a lot of you Crimson Tide fans should be really familiar with Pete Golding as the DC. I don't think he's a good play caller. And I don't think Ole Miss defense has really improved all that much. Although they are really good at getting pressure on the quarterback. And Alabama's offensive line is still playing like garbage. But I still like the Tide to get the win. I'm sorry. Like, you can get mad at me all you want to if you're an Ole Miss fan. But it's still really hard to win on the road in Tuscaloosa. Say what you want to say about Alabama's quarterback problems and some of the concerns that they have on the offensive line and defensively, but I don't care. Like, you got to be still a really good team to beat Alabama, even in the down year. I don't think Ole Miss is going to go on the road and be the second team to beat Alabama at home this season. I just don't see it. I don't think they got the defense. Even though Alabama won't be able to throw the football that great, they still going to be able to have success running the ball at will against that Ole Miss front. And unless Ole Miss can prove me wrong and show that they have what it takes to stop the run game of Alabama, I think Alabama's going to take a lot of time off the clock. They're going to keep Ole Miss offense off the field. They're going to keep their defense on the field. And I think they get the win over the Rebels. 34-21 is my final score prediction. I think that they beat Ole Miss pretty comfortably. I don't think Ole Miss is that great this year, even though I do think they could be in for a pretty good season. I don't think they're good enough to beat Alabama this year. You guys already know I'm taking Duke the football school over UConn is really surprising when you look at how good Duke actually is this year. Like, Duke has a really good chance at being able to win the ACC this year. That's how good Duke has been this year. Like, they could beat FSU. If they face off against FSU at any point this season, I think that Duke probably could end up winning that game. I think I probably would take Florida State to win if I was a betting man, but I think that Duke will have some pretty good chances. UTSA is taking on Tennessee. I like Tennessee to bounce back. UTSA, I know early before the season kicked off officially, many people were a little bit excited about this matchup because UTSA has been one of the better G5 schools in the last couple of years, but they kind of are having a down year. Their star quarterback, Frank Harris, he hasn't looked good. They look like they've taken some steps back, and Tennessee, they're really mad. They're angry from their road loss to Florida. For some reason, they just can't get it done on the road in the Swamp. So I expect a big bounce back performance out of Joe Milton and that Vols offense. Arkansas versus LSU. You know, I might have to talk about this game tomorrow on tomorrow's episode because this is one of the most underrated games of the Week 4 college football slate. Because there's a lot of implications that can come from the potential outcome of this game. If Arkansas wins, you look at LSU really differently because that would be their second loss of the season and they're already out of playoff contention, which is a little bit of a disappointment because many people felt like LSU had a chance of being able to make it to the playoffs this year. So the fact that their season will be over so early will be a major disappointment. Now, if Arkansas loses, then I think that Arkansas fans get even more angry and upset at Sam Pittman, especially with them coming off a loss against BYU. If they get rolled by LSU the same way that Mississippi State got rolled, then I think that the Sam Pittman hot seat talk is really going to start to ramp up. I think that Arkansas really needs to win against LSU. I know they're playing on the road. It's really tough to win at Death Valley, but they need a win here. And even if they don't win, they need to show that they can be competitive because if they get blown out by LSU, yeah, like you definitely are going to have some talks about Sam Pittman's job security. I like LSU to get the win. I think they're the better team. Arkansas, they just don't look like they got it offensively this year. I think that Dan Enos, his play calling definitely has hindered that offense. And defensively, they are better than what they were last year, but I don't know how better. That's really what this game is going to be for this defense. It's going to be a major test. If this defense gets carved up by this LSU offense, then we know what this defense is going to be this year if you're a fan of the Razorbacks. Oregon State, Washington State, another underrated matchup. The battle of the Pac-2. Oregon State, they've looked pretty good. DJ Uyunglele has been going off, but Washington State has looked really impressive as well. They got a win recently, not too long ago, against Wisconsin. And both of these teams, to me, are really evenly matched. They got good defenses, great quarterbacks. I think Oregon State is a lot better up front on both sides of the ball than what Washington State is. But Washington State, I think Cam Ward has the advantage for the Cougars at quarterback. I think he's better than DJ Uyunglele. I think he's a better athlete. And I just think he's a better distributor of the football than what DJU is. Not taking anything away from DJU. Oregon State has the better overall team. But I can see Washington State pulling this win out. I think that a lot of people are a little bit sleep on Washington State. They beat a pretty solid Wisconsin team that most people think is going to end up winning the Big Ten West. And Oregon State, they're good up front, but I really like Washington State's offense in this game. I really think that if this game comes down to a shootout, I like Washington State to win. We already know that Florida's going to take care of Charlotte. They have a lot of momentum. They got a big-time win against Tennessee. I don't see them slipping up against Charlotte. And they're playing at home in the Swamp. Yeah, that place is going to be rocking. The Gators are going to win. Okay, like the performance that Graham Mertz had against Tennessee last week. I know it was nothing special, but it definitely was a pretty solid performance, and he definitely did show in that game that he's good enough to lead Florida to at least 7-8 wins this year, as long as you have a good run game and your defense is playing really good football. UAB travels to Athens to take on the Bulldogs. I like Georgia to win. They're coming off a close win against South Carolina. Well, I wouldn't call it a close win. I mean, they did beat them by 10, but I mean, I guess you could call it close. It was a 10-point win. I'm going to call it close. Okay, I know some people may be like, man, we beat them by 10. It was close to me. Shoot, I thought they were going to beat South Carolina by 40. Texas, Baylor. I'm taking Texas. Some people think Baylor's going to pull off the upset. I strongly doubt that. Baylor's offense is non-existent. Did you see that quarterback that they got replacing Blake Shapen? I think his name is Sawyer Robinson. Yeah, he sucks. Like, if Alabama was struggling to move the ball against Texas defense with bad quarterback or below average quarterback play, what makes you think that Baylor's offense is going to be capable of doing better? So what if they're playing at home? They got no quarterback, fam. Their quarterback is toast. Their quarterback was struggling against some school from Rhode Island last week, a FCS school. He went 10 out of 22 passing. Barely threw for over 100 yards. Like, I don't see how Baylor wins this game at all. Like, I like Texas to win. It may be a close game because Dave Aranda, being the defensive guru that he is, he'll probably find a way to slow down Texas offense early. But after halftime, I think Texas rolls Baylor, and I don't expect this game to be close at all. I think Texas is going to dog walk Baylor. I see this game being a 38-10 beatdown by Texas, and I think Baylor only really scores 10 points late in the game when Texas has some of their backups in, because that Baylor offense is not good. They don't have a quarterback. If you don't have a quarterback, how can you pull off an upset like this against Texas? One of the most talented teams in college football. Not trying to sound like a hater of Baylor. Got a lot of love for Dave Aranda, but for the people that are saying this could be a potential upset to look out for, I ask you, do you trust Sawyer Robinson? Did you see how he was looking like last week? Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. Ohio State is taking on Notre Dame, and I'm just going to go out and say it. I like Notre Dame to win. There's this narrative that Notre Dame can't compete with the big boys. Well, the reason why Notre Dame has came up short against teams like Ohio State and Clemson and Alabama is because they don't have the quarterback needed to beat those kinds of teams. You need to have phenomenal quarterback play if you want to be able to knock off one of the elites of college football. And Notre Dame has that this year with Sam Hartman. Plus, they play Ohio State at home, and I don't care if Kyle McCord looked good in games against, Western Kentucky and Youngstown State. He played like dog shit against Indiana. I can't forget that. You think that just 2 performances against nobody just changes how we view Kyle McCord? Like, this is a prove-it game for Kyle McCord. Sam Hartman gives Notre Dame the edge at quarterback. And if this game is on the line and Ohio State needs a game-winning score to win the game, and they need Kyle McCord to engineer it, I like Notre Dame's defense up against Ohio State's offense. I know nobody's going to be able to guard Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr., but I think Notre Dame is capable of being able to get after Ohio State up front. I don't think this offensive line that the Buckeyes have this season is as good as what it has been in previous years. I like Notre Dame to pull off the win. They're playing at home. They got the advantage at quarterback. I like the Irish. I'm taking Penn State over Iowa. Iowa has a great defense, and their offense is a little bit better, but not good enough to beat Penn State. Drew Aller, he had a little bit of a rocky outing against Illinois. It wasn't as impressive as his previous performances, but Penn State overall, they got a better team, and their defense, I think they probably should shut down Iowa's offense. I probably see Iowa only scoring maybe 10 or 13 points at most in this game offensively. Any of their other scores are probably going to come off scooping scores, pick sixes, or maybe they make a big play in special teams. But I like Penn State to win that game. I don't think Penn State rolls Iowa. Because with how good Iowa's defense is, like, this is going to be a tough game for Penn State, at least for the first 3 quarters. Maybe you pull away late in the fourth quarter and you win this game by maybe 10-17. But I like Penn State to win, but I don't think it's going to be a dominant or a convincing win with the style of football that Iowa normally tends to play in. Iowa normally tends to get up for these big games. Even though this is going to be a whiteout game also, I think that, Iowa, they're going to come ready for this game. I like Penn State, but Iowa, they're definitely a team that you don't want to overlook. Now, we got UNC taking on Pitt. I'm going to go with UNC. Pitt is just awful this year. They don't got a quarterback. Bro, I knew Pitt was screwed when they brought in Phil Dracovic from the transfer portal. Like, did you see that fool at Boston College? You talk about somebody with a strong arm, but no accuracy? Yeah. Phil Dracovic, people, not good at Pitt. And Pitt, this just isn't a good team. I mean, this is probably the worst Pitt team that Pat Narduzzi has put on the field in the last couple of years. So I think North Carolina wins this game, even though I think that they're a little overrated. I still think that they're too Drake May dependent. They win games the same way Colorado wins games. But one thing that makes them a little bit different from Colorado is that they are a tad bit better defensively. This defense definitely has had some good performances, but they still have had some disappointing performances, like against Appalachian State. Anytime UNC faces a capable offense, their defense kind of struggles. But I don't think they're going to struggle in this game against Pitt, unless Pitt can slow down this passing attack and they can get after Drake May and they can take advantage of points off turnovers. But unless that happens, North Carolina should win this game and they should roll. USC is going to annihilate Arizona State. I was debating with one of my homies earlier, how big is the margin of victory going to be for USC in this game? Do they put 70 or 80 on Arizona State? I think it's possible. I definitely think it's possible. Cal versus Washington. I like Washington. Cal, they gave Auburn a fight a couple of weeks ago. They didn't come out with the victory, but they came out competitive. I definitely liked the fight that I saw from Cal, but, they lost that game, and it's not like Auburn is going to be anything special this year, so I think that they're going to lose to Washington by at least 3 possessions. Washington right now looks like a top 3 team in college football. I know they play in the Pac-12, but that's how good they've been playing this year. Their defense looks pretty good. Their offense has picked up from where it left off last year. Washington looks like the best team in the Pac-12 in my opinion. This is it for my Week 4 college football picks and predictions. Give me your picks and predictions down in the comment section down below. Let me know what games you disagree with, what games you agree with me on. Before we move on to our NFL picks and predictions, if you haven't already, make sure that you leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out David Corona, what's going on? Mr. ESPN says, great show, keep up the good work. We appreciate you, Mr. ESPN. Appreciate you, David Corona. Leave a 5-star review if you are enjoying the show and you enjoy the content. The best way to support us is by giving us a 5-star review. That helps us with getting sponsorships and getting more recognition and drawing more viewers to the channel. So if you want to support us and you don't know how, all you got to do is go to whichever podcasting platform that you like to listen to podcasts on, Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon. Type in the JT Sports Podcast and give us a 5-star review. And if you send me a screenshot, I'll give you a shout out. So if you're listening to this live, if you give us a 5-star review, screenshot it, post it on Instagram, add us at JT Sports __, and we'll reshare it and give you a shout out. I got to take a sip of water real quick. All right. Time for get rid of the wins and the losses. Shoot, we don't even got the NFL picks ready to go, man. Where the graphics guy at, man? You supposed to have the picks ready to go, man. You tripping. What's going on? Hold on, people, man. We got to get the graphics going in here, man. We apologize. The graphics guy was not doing his job today, apparently, man. Do we got to find a new graphics guy? I mean, come on, Carl. What you doing? You got to have the graphics up here, man. You knew we was going live today. Now we got to show the whole audience our process when it comes to doing these picks and things, man. We giving out too many secrets. We're not trying to give out all the sauce. We're not trying to give up the Krabby Patty secret formula. Okay, here we go. NFL Week 3 predictions. It's time for you guys to get pissed off with me because the New York Giants, boy, they're about to get crashed by the San Francisco 49ers. Like, the 49ers should manhandle the New York Giants. No Saquon. Offensive line looks crappy. The defense doesn't look that good. I mean, it just looks like the New York Giants are headed for an implosion this season because what we saw against Arizona and Week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys is definitely really concerning if you're a fan of the New York Giants. And the San Francisco 49ers look like one of the best teams in the NFL. They beat the Rams. Brock Purdy's playing pretty well. That defense is playing outstanding. I think the Giants are going to struggle to even move the ball past the 50 in this game. I like the 49ers to win, and I like them to do it in convincing fashion. 27-10 is my final score prediction in this game. Tennessee takes on the Cleveland Browns. I don't know how I feel about this game because this game can go either way. Deshaun Watson has played mid, basically. I don't think he's played bad, but he hasn't played great. He's played mid. And Ryan Tannehill, he's played mid too. He played terrible in Week 1, and then he awoke from his slumber, I guess, and remembered how to be a good quarterback, and he played good last week against the Chargers, albeit it was the Chargers, but I'm not going to discredit him for having a shape-back performance. Who's going to win this game? I don't really know. It could really go either way. I'm going to take the Browns to win. I really like their defense. I definitely believe that the Browns defense is legit with defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz. I think that Tennessee offensively, they're going to struggle. The Browns are going to have a really good run defense in this game, and their secondary is a mismatch against the wide receivers of Tennessee. Outside of DeAndre Hopkins, who was dealing with an ankle injury last week, they don't really have nobody who I really think is a threat against this Browns secondary. Treylon Burks, I don't really think he does too much. Chigo Okonkwo, I haven't even heard dude's name be called at all this season up to this point. I like the Browns. This is going to be a tough game. It probably won't be a lot of points scored. It'll probably be one of those old school, smash mouth, defensive, dominated games. I'll take the Browns. 13-7 is my final score prediction in this game. Steelers taking on the Raiders. I like the Steelers. The Raiders suck. They got to win against the Broncos, but if you didn't watch the Broncos against the Commanders, let me just give you a quick recap. The Broncos are not good. Their defense got shredded by Washington's offense. Washington at one point has scored 20-something points unanswered consecutively? I mean, that offense was rolling. I mean, the Raiders, they got that win against Denver, but they got absolutely trounced by the Buffalo Bills. I don't think the Steelers are going to lose to the Raiders. I think they do bounce back, and even if the offense does struggle, this defense is good enough that they should be able to shut down the Raiders offense with Jimmy Garoppolo and with how bad that offensive line is. We talk about how bad the run game is for Pittsburgh. Josh Jacobs, go look at his statistics in the rushing department last week and come back to me about what you think about the Steelers run game, because the run game we saw from the Raiders last week, at least when it came to Josh Jacobs, non-existent. Falcons versus the Lions. This is one of those games that I'm really excited to watch because I want to see if Atlanta is as good as what their record shows. Their record shows they're 2-0 right now. And they're coming off a come-from-behind win against the Green Bay Packers. A game that Desmond Ridder didn't play that great. The stats show you that he had an okay performance, but if you watch that game, dude damn near threw 4 interceptions. The Lions, they got a really solid defense, at least from a talent standpoint, and their secondary is pretty solid, even though they are going to be without Chauncey Gardner-Johnson for the rest of the year. They still do have Brian Branch, and I like their cornerbacks in Emmanuel Mosley and Cam Sutton. The Falcons, their defense has looked better than what it did last year, but if you're a Falcons fan and you're really trying to figure out just how improved this defense, you're going to get a really good opportunity to see it against one of the best offenses in the NFL. The Lions, I'm picking them to win. I don't got nothing against Atlanta. I probably think Atlanta wins the NFC South based on what I've seen out of the Panthers and everybody else in this division. I kind of have more faith in Atlanta than I do all the rest of the teams in this NFC South division. But the Detroit Lions, I just think they're a little bit too much for Atlanta to handle. If Atlanta can't run the football against Detroit, they got no shot in this game. Detroit is one of those teams that they're capable of being able to hang 30 on you with ease. And if Atlanta can't keep Detroit's offense under wraps, they're not going to be able to hang around with them. Atlanta doesn't have the offense that's built to come from behind down multiple possessions. They're not one of those teams that can go tick for tack for you if this game ends up leading to be a shootout. They're one of those teams that they want to keep things close, and they got to be able to run the football because Desmond Ridder, he's a solid game manager. But when you're facing a high-octane offense, game managers most of the time, I don't really think they're great when it comes to winning high-scoring affairs. They're good when it comes to winning games that are low-scoring. If you want somebody who can take care of the football, somebody who's not going to lose you the game, Desmond Ridder's cool. But when you're trying to beat a team like the Lions that's capable of putting up 30, 40 a game, I think you need a little bit more juice out of your quarterback. Saints, Packers, I'm taking the Packers. The Saints are 2-0, but I think they're one of the worst 2-0 teams in the NFL. The Packers, I've liked what I've seen out of Jordan Love. I think they very well have hit on their third consecutive franchise quarterback. They went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. It looks like the trend continues with Green Bay continuing to find success at the quarterback position. Green Bay has a pretty good defense, even though their defense did kind of implode late against Atlanta. New Orleans, their defense is outstanding, but they don't really have an offense. We didn't see their offense do much against Tennessee, and their offense didn't really do too much against the Carolina Panthers last week until late in the game. Derek Carr, he hasn't been bad, but he's been as good as advertised. You know, I don't really think he's making the Saints better, but he's not losing them games like how Andy Dalton was with his interceptions and his turnovers. The Denver Broncos are going on the road to South Florida to take on the Dolphins. I'm taking the Dolphins to win. The Broncos, I don't think Russell Wilson is as bad as what people are saying he is. I thought that he played pretty okay against the Washington Commanders, but the offense just sputtered out late in that game. The Dolphins have one of the best rosters in the NFL. There aren't too many teams that have the talent that the Dolphins have on both sides of the football. Tua is playing some pretty good football, even though his performance against the Patriots was The Broncos, I just don't think they got any juice right now. I think they're going to fall to 0-3. The Minnesota Vikings are hosting the Chargers at home. This is one of the biggest games of this weekend. The loser of this game falls to 0-3. And their chances of making the playoffs become incredibly dim. And the winner of this game gets their first win of the season. I don't like Brandon Staley. I think he's the worst head coach in the league. They got an awful defense. He's a defensive-minded coach. The only way the Chargers are able to have a chance at winning games is because of Justin Herbert and this offense being able to put up a lot of points. Brian Flores, his defense has been pretty solid. Okay, I think that the Chargers offense, They're going to score some points, but I don't think they're going to have the success that they've had the first 2 weeks against this Minnesota defense. Minnesota doesn't have a crazy amount of talent defensively, but they're pretty well coached. They have a pretty good scheme. They send a lot of pressure. They're super aggressive, so they're not going to give Justin Herbert all day to just sit back and get a lot of big plays downfield. I'm going to take Minnesota to win. The Chargers look like the better team on paper, but I just don't trust Brandon Staley as a head coach. How the hell are they going to stop Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison? The offensive line is shit. We can admit that, but the Chargers, offensively, that's the only thing that you can really count on. That's the only consistent variable about watching the Chargers play is that the offense is going to show up. They're going to score a lot of points, but they're going to give up a lot of points. At least I can trust Brian Flores and company to get a couple of key stops here and there. I think Minnesota wins this game because they got the big coaching advantage. Not just when it comes to head coach, but when you compare Minnesota's coaching staff to the coaching staff of the Chargers, I think Minnesota clears. The New York Jets face off against the New England Patriots after getting roughed up by the Dallas Cowboys. Are we going to see more offense out of New York? Zach Wilson, he didn't have a great stat line against Dallas. I don't think he played necessarily bad. It's just he was playing against the Dallas Cowboys. The Patriots got a good defense, though. A really good defense. And their offense, it looks way, way better with Bill O'Brien calling plays, which isn't really a surprise. And Mac Jones has looked pretty solid this year. I'm going to roll with the Patriots to get the win. Zach Wilson, he could be seeing ghosts in this game. We don't know just how improved Zach Wilson is. It's kind of hard to judge him based on the performance where the team that he was playing on was just completely outmatched by the Dallas Cowboys defense that was getting pressure on Zach Wilson. They were throwing a lot of confusing looks at Zach Wilson. Just a really hard game to get a really good read on just how improved Zach Wilson is in his third year as the quarterback for the New York Jets. But I like New England to win. I know they are playing on the road, but with how good that defense is and the fact that unless New York can have success running the football, I don't think they're going to do too much offensively. Now, if the Jets defense, ends up forcing a couple of turnovers and they can get favorable field position for this offense, I can see them winning this game. The Bills take on the Commanders. It's easy to take Buffalo to win, right? But the Commanders are a team that's being really overlooked. They match up really well with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills destroyed the Las Vegas Raiders. It's the Las Vegas Raiders. So, how much can we really give the Buffalo Bills credit for destroying the Raiders because they're a bad team? They're playing against the Commanders. The Commanders have a really solid team. And they got a really good defensive line. And what's the biggest Achilles heel with the Bills offense? Their offensive line is not that good. I don't think this offensive line is going to hold up against this Washington Commanders defensive line, especially with that man, Chase Young, kind of looking like he's returning back to the Chase Young that we saw during his rookie season when he won Rookie of the Year. Buffalo's defense is outstanding. Okay, not denying that. But with their offense, Josh Allen being turnover prone, that allows a team like the Commanders to be able to hang around in a game like this. I'm going to take the Commanders to win. Josh Allen, he's too reckless with the football, going up against a really good defense and a really good offensive line. I think we're going to see that carelessness come back in this game. Sam Howell, he'll have a tough game against a really good Buffalo Bills defense. But I think with how this defense can potentially play in this game, I think that the Commanders can come off with a victory and they can improve the 3-0 on the season. I'm taking the Jags over the Texans. I've been a little disappointed with what I've seen out of the Texans. I thought they would have been a little bit better defensively. Maybe it's going to take a little bit more time for the Micheal Ryans to be able to do everything that he wants to do schematically on defense, but I think the Jags just rolled the Texans in that game. CJ Stroud, he's going to have a good performance. The Jags defense isn't anything to brag about, but I like the Jags to get the win. 31-17 is my final score prediction. I'm taking the Ravens to beat the Colts. Anthony Richardson, he's dealing with a concussion. He left the game early last week. Gardner Minshew came in for him. We don't know if he's going to come back and play in this game or if he could miss this game. But either way, whether he plays or he doesn't, Baltimore is going to walk away with the victory. Baltimore's defense is way too tough to see Anthony Richardson having any success through the air. On the ground, it's going to be intriguing to see how the Ravens game plan for him defensively, but I don't think they're going to struggle against Anthony Richardson because they face a similar quarterback in Lamar Jackson in practice every single day. Plus, they got Tyler Huntley, who can also replicate Anthony Richardson in some ways. I like the Ravens to win, and I think they do it convincingly. Panthers versus Seahawks. It definitely feels as this is a must-win game for Carolina. And I know it sounds weird how I just said that. I meant to say it feels like this is a game that Carolina has to win. Because if they go 0-3, it's going to be incredibly tough to get back into the swing of that division. If, let's say, Tampa Bay goes 3-0 and they beat Philly, or New Orleans goes 3-0, Carolina getting out to a 0-3 start, not ideal. It definitely would be them digging themselves in a really deep hole. Seattle, they're playing at home. It's tough to beat Seattle at home. They just got a better overall team than the Panthers. Unless Bryce Young just plays like a man possessed, which he could because Seattle's defense has severely underperformed. This defense has way too much talent to play the way that it has. I like Seattle to get the win overall, though. I just think for the Panthers, they're just out of sorts right now. They don't really have identity. They got a good defense, but offensively, receivers can't separate. Offensive linemen don't know how to fucking block. It's just a mess down there in Carolina. The Seahawks, I think they're going to win this game fairly easily, and I don't really think it's going to be all that close, man. The Seahawks just got a really good team, and the Carolina Panthers, they just happen to have one of the worst teams in the NFL. Like, anytime Adam Thielen at, he's 32, 33 years old, is your number one wide receiver, you're in trouble. Like, you're in trouble. I think against the Seahawks, the Panthers, man, they're going to have a really hard time doing anything against the Seahawks, man. Just keeping in the stack. Like, this defense should have a pretty good day getting pressure on Bryce Young. I just think it's going to be a mismatch in that game. Chicago taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. You talk about must-win games. If there's any team that needs to win more than anything, it's Chicago. And you got to do it on the road and the toughest environment in the whole entire National Football League. In Arrowhead, against Patrick Mahomes, Justin Fields is calling out coaches. He hasn't played good. The offensive line hasn't played good. The wide receivers, they've looked impressive. DJ Morris looked really good, but that's about it. Justin Fields, you trust him in this game? I love me some Justin Fields. He's my favorite player in the NFL, but it's kind of hard to keep making excuses for him. And it's hard to see the Bears winning this game against Kansas City. I just don't see how Kansas City loses to Chicago unless Justin Fields has a masterclass performance where he just picks apart this Chiefs defense. This is the best Steve Spagnuolo defense that I've seen in all his years that he's been the DC for Andy Reid and KC. This defense, they got multiple guys who can get pressure on the quarterback, not just Chris Jones. He's probably going to have just 2-3 sacks alone by himself in this game. They're going to be able to keep Justin Fields in the pocket, limit what he can do as a runner. And defensively, Chicago, they're not good on that side of the ball either. I think that the Chiefs are going to win this game, but I don't know if it would be by a comfortable margin. I could see this game coming down to the wire. I just think that the Bears are going to come in with a lot of fight. This is going to be desperation mode for them. I don't think they want to go 0-3, so there's going to be added motivation. Justin Fields just called out the coaching staff, so we'll see if they start getting back to what was working last year when Justin Fields was having success. Dallas is going to beat Arizona. We pretty much know this. The question is, by how much are they going to beat Arizona? Is Arizona actually going to have a competitive game against the Dallas Cowboys. Arizona, their last 2 games have come down to the wire. They've looked like a team that doesn't look like they're trying to tank for Caleb Williams. If Arizona can give the Dallas Cowboys a competitive game, I will look at Jonathan Gannon with a different perspective than what I did prior to this season. Prior to this season, I thought it was a bad hire. I didn't think it was going to work. But if Arizona can compete against Dallas and keep this thing being a one-possession game, I kind of will have my opinion changed about how I feel about their head coach. Philadelphia is taking on Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, they're 2-0. Y'all know that? Yeah, like they got wins over the Bears and the Vikings. Well, both of their wins are going up against teams that have no wins currently. They're going against a Philadelphia Eagles team that's better at every single side of the football, but they kind of aren't the same team that they were last year. They are missing their 2 coordinators who are now head coaches, and Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown got into it last week, Thursday Night Football against the Vikings. I just think that Philadelphia, this definitely is an upset spot for them. We thought that week 1 kind of was a trap game against New England, and they struggled in that game, and they possibly could struggle against the Buccaneers. Todd Bowles is a defensive-minded coach. We know one thing about Todd Bowles, his defenses are always going to be up to par. But what about that Tampa Bay offense? How's this offensive line going to fare against one of the best defensive lines in the NFL? This is an offensive line that has multiple guys playing out of position. Tristan Wirfs is playing left tackle, previously played right tackle. They got a couple of guys on the offensive line out of position also. I want to see how this offensive line looks, and I want to see how Baker plays against the best defense that he's seen in the first month of his Buccaneers career. Yeah, the Vikings have a pretty solid defense. The Bears got one of the worst defenses in the NFL, but we're really going to see just how good Baker is against this Philadelphia Eagles defense that can get after you. They got really good players in the secondary. I like the Eagles to win this game. I think the Bucs could surprise some people. Philadelphia may not be able to blow them out, but I definitely do think they should avoid walking out with the loss. And lastly, I got the Bengals beating the Rams. If Joe Burrow doesn't play, I'm going to take the Rams. But even then, I'm not super confident in the Bengals winning this game. The Rams do have some players on offense. Puka Nacua, who I picked up in all my fantasy leagues, has been going crazy. Matthew Stafford is looking like an MVP candidate. The Rams, don't be surprised if they pull off the win. This is a big game for Cincinnati. It is one that I do trust them to win, but I could also see them dropping this game. This is it for my NFL Week 3 predictions. Let me know what you guys think about my picks down in the comment section down below. And this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. That's all I have for today. I appreciate you guys tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed, leave us with a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. All you got to do is type in the JT Sports Podcast. We'll greatly appreciate it. Or you can go down to the description down below. Give us a 5-star review via the Apple or Spotify links. Like, subscribe to the channel.